Let's go! The 5 biggest questions of the LSU spring practice period. You guys know the dates by now. March 9th, leading into the spring game, which will be on April 22nd. Today, we're going to go through the major storylines, and this is such a fun photo here. Brian Kelly last year at this time with the background. That is so freaking dope. The biggest question, obviously, will be the LSU quarterback battle, and obviously, is this even a battle at all between Garrett Nussmeier and Jayden Daniels? What I will say is at least LSU has clarity on who their top 2 guys are. Ricky Collins will now be the quarterback 3 for LSU, and I doubt he will be able to jump either Jayden Daniels or Garrett Nussmeier during the spring session. So will the QB3 be Malik Neighbors? You never know. But all jokes aside, this is going to be a fun next couple of weeks as we take a look at how Garrett Nussmeier and Jayden Daniels has actually grown as quarterbacks. Boom! Looking at you. Yes, you right now. And while quarterback is going to be the biggest question, we want to see Garrett Nussmeier limit his turnovers. We want to see Jayden improve as a passer. We want to see just Ricky Collins develop. This right here is actually always the most important question for spring. The injuries. Can LSU avoid them? Now, injuries are random, but last spring they were able to not have anyone be seriously hurt. There were some guys that did get dinged up, but for the most part, everyone remained intact. And now you're looking at a list of players that will not be available for spring. And as you can see, there's some key guys that played a lot of snaps last year, and Mason Taylor, Mekhi Wingo, and a few others. And is it a big deal that they missed the spring? And my response to that is probably not. Of course, it's always better for players to get more reps, but some of these guys have had ridiculous snap counts, and it's probably better for them to rest up. So, and we'll discuss this at the end. How much does all of this even matter? We don't know, right? That's why it's important for your best players to remain healthy. Question number 3, where will Harold Perkins play? Also in the background, you see Sage Ryan out of focus here. How about that bokeh, baby? A camera term for you. But the truth here is, how does LSU want to utilize Harold Perkins? And you can ask this question about a lot of players. Where is Greg Brooks' best position? He played safety and nickel last year. But I think the guy that will generate some buzz as far as a coach is concerned is John Jancic. He is the only new on-field assistant coach that LSU hired this offseason. And now Jancic is your new special teams coordinator, but he is also the new outside linebackers coach for LSU, more so as a pass rush specialist, which is very interesting. So this kind of all ties in together. So LSU now has 5 coaches devoted to the defensive side of the football. And John Jancic, of course, will also serve as LSU's new special teams coordinator. But Brian Kelly is electing to delegate special teams responsibilities to different people, including off-field analysts. So this is the most fascinating position for me because LSU is going to need to figure out who their jack linebacker is going to be, which is otherwise known as the standing outside linebacker, the position that B.J. Ojulari almost exclusively played last year alongside Harold Perkins. But it's a little more complicated than that because they would sometimes be on the field at the same time in exotic pass rushing only situations. So this is where LSU needs to ask a basic fundamental question. Is Harold Perkins an every down jack linebacker, or do they want to use him as, forgive the pun, a jack of all trades, kind of like what they did last year? That is going to be the big question. So, for me, I think It's not too complicated. Harold Perkins needs to be on the field as much as possible because he is obviously a difference maker on defense. But if LSU can't figure out what their off-ball linebacker situation is going to be, obviously they bring in Omar Speights from the transfer portal. Greg Penn returns as a starter. Whit Weeks, along with Wes Weeks, will still be in this linebacking core. Whit, of course, being an early enrollee true freshman. This is going to be very interesting, the linebacker position going into next year. So let me know down below what you guys think about this. We've talked about it plenty on live streams, and if this just happens to be your first time ever watching my channel, you better come to the live streams Tuesdays, Thursdays, and now Sunday nights during the off season. Boom! Looking at you. Yes, you. And question number 4 will be about the LSU offensive line. But before we do that, let's actually celebrate this Pulitzer Prize winning photo. And I don't know if this is going to win a Pulitzer or not, but I think it should. I love seeing the behind the scenes workout videos. So remember, while spring football is starting with the players getting in pads and such, they have already been working out. The one thing I really like about this photo, not only the energy from Will Campbell, I think this is Miles Frazier, Malik Neighbors. It's kind of hard to see with this bar. Kyron Lacey, and I believe this is Emory Jones over here. These are key players, guys that will play a lot next year for LSU. Is the camaraderie being built right here? There are a lot of returners on the offensive side of the football. Is this right here going to be your starting group? Now, Anthony Bradford is here in the back. He has gone to the NFL. He had a really good combine. But Charles Turner, it was revealed that he will be out for spring football. And I apologize to my patrons. I actually had him as the number 1 player to watch for spring football a few weeks ago. So, LSU goes to get a transfer offensive lineman, Mason Lunsford, coming in from Maryland. And while he has never played center, he said he is open to that possibility. And right now, for spring football, my best guess is Marlon Martinez is going to be your center throughout spring. Now, they do differ in how they play. I do think Martinez is a little bit bigger. Martinez also does the dead ball snap, which, Turner does the traditional snap. But honestly, this position is going to be the most fascinating. I do think LSU might shuffle up this line. I feel pretty comfortable that Will Campbell's going to be your starting left tackle, as he should. He was LSU's best offensive lineman last year for me. I think what's going to be interesting is Emory Jones. Does he move inside to guard? What about Miles Frazier? Is he able to hold on to his starter's role with Lunsford coming in? What about Garrett Dellinger? There are so many different questions with this offensive line, and it kind of gets into a deeper discussion about a few decisions that Brad Davis, Brian Kelly, and Mike Denbrock are going to have to make, which is who is going to play where, and do we risk losing the chemistry that was built with the LSU offensive line last year? Now, what makes this last year very interesting when it comes to the LSU offensive line is where these guys actually lined up changed drastically from spring to actually the second game of the season when they decided to start Cam Wire at right tackle. He is now at Tulane, and the answer at right tackle ended up being a true freshman who did not arrive until fall. Now, as many of you know, we did a conversation a few weeks ago, actually now a few months ago, with Lance Hurd. And by the way, he wants to be known as Lance Hurd. I still see Zalance everywhere. Lance is Lance. So Lance Hurd, he is also not an early enrollee. So he will not be with LSU during the spring period. Kind of like Emory Jones. He wasn't until the fall and an actual starter for LSU. So does LSU say, look, we should trust what we have now, and if we absolutely need to, we can move Lance Hurd to right tackle and slide Emory Jones in to guard? Maybe that is something that they do. But you do run the risk of losing some chemistry that might have already been built by some of these players who played last year. So it should be very interesting. I do think Garrett Dellinger becomes a big piece of what LSU does, and obviously the injuries. These begin to pile up, and your offensive line, we discussed this recently on Blake's show, AYS. I'm on there every Monday at 7:30. You don't need a starting 5 offensive line. You, in theory, need a starting 8. You need your starting 5, and you need 3 backups, at least 2 of which can play multiple positions. So let's ask the biggest question and understand that there are a gazillion, including what is a secondary going to look like? Will Sage Ryan take that next step? What about running back and receiver? And what about BTJ? Does he take another leap forward? You get it, leap, and him making the leap and catch versus Florida. What's very interesting about Brian Thomas Jr. is that he did have a dominant spring last year. I can't tell you how many different highlights LSU cut of him making plays, but oftentimes these plays are coming up against backup defenders. Remember, Converse got hurt early in the spring, and of course, this guy, where is he going to play? Greg Brooks. There's all these different questions, but I want to answer a big one here. Does any of this even matter? Comment down below. Now, you're looking at the 23, and I should say now 22, as Michael Doherty, an early enrollee, has already packed his bags, which is very bizarre, but still, you're looking at 22 players, and they're being zoomed in right now. And there are actually a few guys here that are early enrolled that won't even be available for spring football anyway. So, including Jordan Jefferson, a very highly touted defensive tackle coming in from West Virginia. This is a very good question to answer, right? What is spring football exactly? Well, it is 15 practices that you're allowed to have along with the spring game to, of course, get pads on players and get an early start on everything. But there's a lot of mischaracterizations that could come from spring and spring games in particular. Who could forget Richard Murphy and John Trey Kirkland's amazing spring practice or spring game performances, just for those guys to end up being decent players but not spectacular players as those games would have indicated. So, yeah, this is a question that I think about quite a bit. Are early enrollees something that truly matters in the grand scheme of things? LSU had early enrollees last year, but in actuality, 4 of their 5 true freshmen later enrollees, or should I say, of the 5 true freshmen that played quite a bit last year for LSU, 4 of them weren't available in the spring. So it is a good question. I am a big believer in getting rid of the early enrollee thing anyway for high school players. Move back the signing period so it doesn't interfere with bowl season. That's just me, but I know a lot of you disagree with that take that I often give, and I think would solve a lot of college football's coaching search issues. But that's a different discussion for a different day. I do think spring football matters in some aspects. Of course, getting the pads on, I think, is actually a cool thing for players. I know working out can get tired, so it is actually fun to actually get out there and play actual football. But then again, it's not really actual football because you're not really bringing guys to the ground. So, I mean, you do some, but not a whole lot. I do think it's a good question to ask. Can we fix spring football? Can we throw in maybe a preseason game, if you will, versus another team? I don't know. But this is why the injury thing is always the biggest deal for me, because we don't know the value of spring football just yet. All we do know is what can hurt your next season's performance is if you get a very serious injury during spring, which is why coaches overall are cautious of their players. So let me know what you guys think down below, and we'll discuss this topic more on the Thursday night live stream after LSU's initial spring practice. So comment down below, and we'll keep this conversation moving. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! Floating in your face, we have some extra content for you to check out, and tonight we are doing salmon. Let's go.